So, let's see, I want to start first by saying that we're a homeschooling family, and it has integrated into our lives, period. We don't just homeschool from a time to a time. So everything you hear is more about a whole lifestyle. It's not just what happens to your day. My scripture that I found that really points to this year, because this is the very first year that I'm only homeschooling sons. I have my two sons, and my neighbor has custody of a young man, and I'm homeschooling him also. So it's all boys. And so the Proverbs 1:8 says, "Listen, my son, to your father's instructions, and do not forsake your mother's teaching." Amen. So this year's been very unique. Every year's unique. My theme for homeschooling is freedom. Now, to me, homeschooling means freedom. Most parents look at it and go, freedom? Freedom is when you send your kids off to school and they're gone all day and you're free to do whatever you want. But to me, that doesn't mean freedom. True, I don't have the time to work outside the home. Some homeschooling moms do. They work outside the home and homeschool. And I can't just pop off to lunch with friends whenever I want. I can. We just call it a play date. So, as we explore the topics and the reasons for homeschooling, you're going to see the freedom aspect in it all. In fact, I asked my 21-year-old daughter and a lot of homeschoolers this question: what's the best thing about homeschooling? And their answers reflect that. Her answer says traveling, being able to learn hands-on about things that other kids just have to sit in a classroom and imagine. I told you she was a hands-on kid, so we did a lot with that. And having a better relationship with the family. The family aspect, of course, because we're moms, is very important to us. And I was kind of surprised at how many answers were about family. Our children span 10 years. The age difference between my oldest and youngest is 10 years. And the relationship my 11-year-old has with my 21-year-old is pretty strong. When they're apart, they Skype each other, and it's really funny to hear him on Skype with his sister. Sometimes he'll ask her opinion about something. It's really funny. Other times, they'll just share funny video clips that they have found on YouTube together, and they're just laughing, and he's like, wait, you gotta see this one, and she'll go, oh, you like this, and they'll just go on like that on Skype, having this wonderful conversation. And I wouldn't have guessed that would have been one of my main reasons for homeschooling, the family aspect, but it has become. It's now like one of the top reasons. I had no idea it would be that important to me. But I'm thinking, as the children grow up together, and they mature together, and they see each other in every awkward stage that they go through, there's a bond that happens there just because they're together, and there's no getting very far apart except different rooms in a house. Let's see. Here we go. Some definitions of homeschooling. These are not the state definitions of homeschooling, but more what homeschoolers think of homeschooling. There's three aspects to the first definition. One is that the funding of the student's education comes from the family, not the government. Number two, the educational service is provided by the parents, not state-funded or privately funded financed employees, private school or church-related school. Number three, the regulation of the whole enterprise is internal to the family, not the responsibility of the government or a religious body. Deftly put, I kind of like this one, it's just the rejection of public and private schooling and the use of home as the center of educational gravity. But let's put away the negative aspects and look at a positive. Homeschooling is the view that education is best when teaching and learning are integrated into the relationships and activities of the family. That's kind of what I said at the beginning. Homeschooling becomes kind of what your family does, just becomes part of the family. Even though home education is the oldest form of education, you go way back in history, everybody was homeschooled or privately tutored or in some way at home for school. Homeschooling's only been legal in North Carolina since 1988 because a group of advocacy by a group of concerned parents. So we thank them. Now, a lot of the information today was taken from the NCHE website, which is North Carolina Home Educators. They, the amount of information they have for new homeschoolers and people starting out is fantastic. There's nothing like that when we started. So, in general, why do families homeschool? It says, citing a variety of reasons, including a desire to give their child more opportunity for self-directed learning in a safe, unhurried, stress-free environment, and include in the curriculum the culture, morals, and religious heritage of the family. Because, think about it, as parents, we've succeeded, we've made it, we've made it to this point in our lives, and we know what got us there. We know it's our religious heritage, it's our morals, it's what was handed down to us. And we want to pass that on to our children, and not just have it be a side thing that we pass on when they're not in school. It becomes part of school when you homeschool to pass that on. So, all right, it says homeschools come in a large variety of flavors, as I call them. There's different styles, there's different sizes of families can predict how a homeschool is going to run. And some schools are done while traveling. I know a family that spent a whole year traveling, and they did homeschool on the road and wherever they stopped. Some are outside. I have friends that are farmers. Almost all their homeschooling takes place outside. Very rarely are they in their house doing school. Some are year-round. You can frame it however you want. And some are what a young man who I saw give a TED Talk, he was a homeschooler, he gave a TED Talk and he called it school hacking. Once he got all the basics down, basically once he reached about 5th, 6th grade, that middle school range, he was allowed to explore whatever he was interested in. He went and shadowed people, he learned all kinds of things, whatever he was interested in learning, and he called it school hacking. It sounded really cool. I said, what unifies homeschoolers is a decision to forego the conventional school experience and instead become more directly involved in their child's learning. All right. So I wrote down my reasons for homeschooling, and I had 7 really solid reasons. I went to the NCHE website. They had 10 reasons, and all my 7 were in there. And I'm like, oh, hell, this is cool. I was kind of surprised. I'd never done that before. So, stealing from them, we're going to go in their order. The decision to homeschool, first of all, involves commitment. It involves sacrifice and dedication. It requires commitment of financial resources for education and curriculum materials. You can get stuff cheap, and sometimes it works. And you can get stuff really expensive that doesn't work. So, the amount of financial burden of homeschooling varies tremendously. It depends on what you need and what you're looking for. It takes a commitment of time for preparation and for working with your children. Your children are with you all the time. That's a lot of commitment. But I don't know. I think it's fun. We have lots of fun. Not that we don't have bad days. I just realized how tall Cooper was the other day. He was doing something, he was driving Adam and I both crazy. I kept warning him. I had finally had it. I walked over, and I took him by the ear and moved him to where I could. And then as you put my hands on his shoulders, I went, oh God. Whoa, it used to be here. So that was funny. But we know each other really well, and we know how to push each other's buttons very well because we know each other so well. And Cooper's really good at that. Okay, you will have to sacrifice the normal life. The normal life is not homeschooling. You'll be different from your neighbors, you'll be different from your friends. And so why would you consider doing this? Well, for me, it's freedom is the reason to do this. So going through the 10 reasons. First is tutorial-style education is more time-effective than classroom teaching. I actually looked at a few studies, and they all agreed Educators, these are like educators, professional educators, estimate that 2 hours of tutoring, you can cover the same material that a classroom teacher takes a whole day to cover. And when I started homeschooling, my neighbor's charge, I'll call him, he was amazed. I had a list of, I asked him what he learned in school, what subjects he was taking in school. And he arrived at 9 o'clock every morning, and before lunch he was done. And he was like, wow, why does school take so long? He was totally amazed. And so with home education, you can give your child the precious gift of time. It gives them time to play. Playing is really important for children. Time to read. Oh my, I don't have a child who hates to read. Cooper is warming to it a little slower than the rest, but they all love to read. Time to draw. Some of them just want to go out and observe nature. Some of them like to do projects. What about singing or learning to play an instrument? That can become time used well by your child. They can be involved in service projects. Some homeschooling kids run cottage industries, and some of them pursue huge interests. I met a young man who went on a summer mission trip. He was 8th grade, went on a summer mission trip at his church, and learned about human trafficking. And his heart just broke. And and it was young boys, young women, it didn't matter the gender. I can't remember what country he went. But he got this army of homeschoolers to start learning about human trafficking. And they went to this country and they helped set up a cottage industry where these children could actually work and get actual pay. I mean, it was just incredible, mind-boggling. That these kids put this together. So, just time for things like that you don't have if you're in school all day. All right, number 2, across the nation, the average home-educated child achieves high scores on standardized achievement tests. Now, I have a child that totally skewed that. I have one that can't test at all. The idea of test just causes brain freeze. It didn't matter. Went to community college, got good grades, transferred. Testing doesn't matter. So, that's not a rule. Number 3, the homeschool can be tailored to fit your child's maturity and learning style. I call that style freedom. Rather than your child fitting into a graded education system, now they're calling it Common Core, right? Your school can be molded to fit the needs of your child. In fact, a common quote among homeschoolers is, Mom, what grade am I in? And our answer, well, what subject? Because they go at their own pace. I actually know a 4th grader, I'm not kidding, a 4th grader. He has finished Algebra 1 and 2, and this year in 4th grade, he's been working on geometry. He has found geometry to be challenging. His first time he's been challenged. So he's not finished it yet. But his mom said he is determined this summer to finish geometry because he wants to do trigonometry in the fall. Now, he has a sister who's in 7th grade, and she still is struggling with her times tables. She just doesn't have it. But his sister can spell any word you give her out of any college dictionary. So, what grade am I in? Well, what subject? So several government-funded studies in the 1920s and 30s showed that classroom instruction and book work that requires abstract reasoning were not the most effective way to educate children under the age of 10. Well, what do they do in school? They sit at a desk, they have to be quiet, and they have to study learn out of a book. The teacher stands up there and gives them instruction, but then they have a book, right? There's no other way for a classroom teacher to do it. She can't have projects constantly going on. For them, they've got to get the information across, and they've got to keep control of that many kids. So they don't really have the alternative. We have lots of alternatives. We can totally run our school the best way that fits our child's learning style. In home education, a child has the opportunity to develop mentally and physically before he's exposed to structured bookwork. I can't get that out. Also, in areas where the child excels, they're permitted to go at their own rate. Number 4, home-educated students are more creative, usually, not all, more creative than their classroom-educated counterparts. I call that freedom to create. Now, you guys all know about Odyssey of the Mind, so I experience creative kids constantly. And we've gone to competitions and seen some awesome public school teams who are very creative. So this isn't a rule across the board. But the reason we say this is it says the classroom experience encourages group thinking, whereas homeschooling encourages independent thinking. Homeschool students are given the freedom and even encouragement to chase what a classroom teacher would call rabbit trails. Many of these excursions result in the deeper understanding of the subject. Well, we have a great example of that. Sandy, our oldest, loved The Sound of Music. I mean, she would watch the movie The Sound of Music weekly. She probably watch it daily, but I limited her. And she just, she loves dance, she loves music, she loved the whole storyline. So Frank was like, well, who is Captain Von Trapp? Who are these people? So they spent, I don't know, a long time looking up who these people were. They learned about the real Captain Von Trapp. They learned what a character Maria Von Trapp was. And because of that, Sandy learned all about World War II from that perspective. She learned a whole lot of things. That wasn't part of my curriculum. That wasn't part of my plan. But they, together, learned, just followed a rabbit trail. Okay? You can't do that in a classroom. You got a child interested in something, you say, well, go home and research it yourself. They're homeschooling, aren't they? So, one of my primary reasons for homeschooling is the creativity aspect. That's always been my primary reason. We're created by an incredibly creative God. And, go to an aquarium, look at the fish. Some of them have purple lips. I can see God. Purple, that's cool. So, he's so creative. Every animal, every, aspect of creation is just bleeding with creativity, okay? And we're created by that same God, and we're unique because we have the image of God in us. Image of God? Wow, that makes us extremely creative. But if you're in a setting where your creativity might get you laughed at, or your creativity might cause disruption in the classroom, how can you have the freedom to be creative? So I always said that every child has gifts and talents put there by God, and they're put there for a reason, because He's going to call them to use them someday. So homeschooling enables you to let those those gifts and talents grow and produce, and so that when God calls them, they're ready. Number 5, home education affords children more opportunity to learn from real-life experiences rather than exclusively learning from books. I call this travel and real-life experience freedom. In 1989, Dr. Sam Peavy, Professor Emeritus, University of Louisville, Kentucky, stated, "The best preparation for real life is to live it every day, as home scholars do. It is the institutionalized student in the regular school who's compelled to live in an unreal setting. For example, children can learn math in the kitchen, math in the workshop, math in the supermarket." This is great. My neighbor, who's in charge, I told you I'm homeschooling, he loves Gatorade, all the different flavors. And she's like, man, this stuff can get expensive. So she told him to figure out what was the cheapest way to buy his Gatorade. Either the big jug, the little bottles, all these different varieties. So he did. He stood there and he wrote down the size of each container and how many fluid ounces it was and the price and everything. And he calculated before they left the grocery store which was the best deal to buy his Gatorade. And she was like, that was so, she said it really wasn't her idea. She just kept telling him, Gatorade's too expensive, I can't keep this up. And he took it upon himself to do that. And she was like, yeah, this is cool. I'm like, yes, grocery store schooling. Okay, it becomes like a natural development by living real life. And how many times do kids in school go, well, what good is learning this? What good is this going to do me? But that they're out there learning in real life, along with, I'm not totally against all textbooks and things. I tend to shy away from them. But they're learning in real life, learning in textbooks at the same time, and they can see the meshing of the two. It's not like, I go to school, and then I come home and do real life. It's all one big picture. So there's a natural development of life skills that are not part of the traditional classroom. Okay, I just popped that in there because there's a life skill. We flog every year at the state fair. It's always part of school. And we always calculate, time to go do that. And I don't call them time off. They're still school days. They're great experiences. Slides get boring when they're all black and white. So. All right. Next reason is parents are the most effective agents for positive socialization of children. I call this one freedom from peer pressure. It kind of goes along with the freedom to be creative. It says a study of Phillips in 1969 found that young children are unable to reason consistently until they are at least 7 to 11 years old, and even older. You know that. They give you a reason for something that they want to do, and they'll turn around and give you a reason that isn't consistent with the first reason, and you can't reason with a young child. It used to drive me crazy. So if they're all together and they're all the same age, then you're risking that development of the reasoning skills because they're just reasoning with each other illogically for a long time. It says that the risk is involved in turning them out of the singular security of the home before those ages, so they don't develop that logical progression of thought as quickly. It says in 1970, a study by Yuri Bronfenbrenner found that attachment to peers, I like this one, attachment to peers seemed to be influenced by weakness at home, lack of contact, they're away all day, how can they have contact? Lack of attention or concern there. And it wasn't the strength of the attraction of the peer group. It was the not having the interaction with the parents that caused them to flow toward the peer group. And it says, quote, children who have such peer orientation tend to be pessimistic about the future, to be less likely to accept responsibility and leadership, and to have a greater tendency toward errant behavior. Little children are not Little children are not carriers of sound social and moral values, but they're interacting with each other, sharing those values, even though they're not sound. A study at the University of Michigan in 1993, a social development of adults, this is cool, who have been home educated, revealed 100% were gainfully employed. 100%. So that meant 0 on welfare. 41% had attended college. 65% were self-employed. 15% had a graduate degree. 79% said that homeschooling had given them the ability to interact with a wide variety of people. And 94% said that home education had prepared them for independence. 96% said if they had to choose again, they would choose to be homeschooled. Children attain confidence and independent thinking when their exposure to peer pressure is reduced and interaction with their parents is increased. Home-educated children learn social behavior from their parents instead of other children. Also, because homeschooled children typically have contact with a wide variety of people, they can better relate to people of different ages and different backgrounds. Wow, I can totally understand that one. When we lived in Pennsylvania, my mom and my grandmother were in a nursing home right near us. And my mom suffered from ALS. My grandmother was legally blind and had crippling arthritis. And we were there lots, a whole lot. It became part of our homeschool. We would do school sometimes at the nursing home. And they were not intimidated by anything there. People on oxygen, people in wheelchairs, people with walkers, none of that intimidated them. On the other hand, when they were together with other homeschoolers, like my daughters were in the play Tom Sawyer, they just hung out with each other, like all the girls usually hung out with all the girls. They were in grades 1 through 12. And the 12, the girls in grades 11 and 12 didn't have any problem with a first or second or third grader tagging along and hanging out. Never a complaint. They just did it. There's none of that, well, I'm great at you, and well, I'm superior to you because I'm in a higher grade. Just doesn't happen. And isn't that more like how the world is? When you get a job, you're working with people of all different ages, all different education levels, and you just all work together. So I just find it more real life, interacting with tons of different age groups. Now they'll plug in different nursing homes, and even when Cooper started plugging when he was 4, even when he was little, he'd go up afterwards and some lady was smiling at him and he'd give her a hug and everything. And I found some of the kids intimidated by the wheelchairs and things, and they would kind of hang back. And their plugging teacher would remark, that doesn't bother your kids at all. Well, it's kind of part of their life. So, all right, down to number 7. Parents have the freedom to choose what their child is taught and when and how it is taught. There's many things to be taught and different methods to teach, tons of different methods. When educating at home, a parent has greater flexibility in changing the content and the methods of educating to suit the child and the family. Christians believe that parents are ultimately responsible for the education of their child. In order to fulfill this responsibility, parents must have the freedom to tailor the instruction to the child. The principle is clear in Christian teaching when fathers are commanded not to goad or exasperate their children in the educational process. Ephesians 6:4, you fathers, again, must not goad your children to resentment, but give them the instruction and correction which belong to a Christian upbringing. I love that for homeschooling. It's perfect. If one method of educating vexes the child, the parent should change the method. Maybe the whole curriculum's wrong. Maybe the way you're going about doing it's wrong. But there's definitely a way to be more productive. This shift in instructional method is more easily accomplished in a homeschool setting. If a curriculum isn't working, we've sold it, we've traded it, we've just thrown it away because I've gone, this is no good for anybody. Different views exist over which things should be taught, but the Christian faith requires parents to teach their children about God. In Deuteronomy 6:4-7, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, one God, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. These commandments which I give you this day are to be kept in your heart. You shall repeat them to your sons. Speak of them indoors and out of doors, when you lie down and when you rise. Sounds like homeschooling to me. Home education empowers parents to pass their values and their worldview to their children without undue interference from those who do not share their views. My children love to ask questions. And sometimes it makes me nervous, the answers I give, because I know I'm going to hear them again. I'm going to hear them from them. I'm going to hear from some parent, your daughter told me this. Well, yeah, that's what I told her. You got a problem with it? I guess you do. Okay. If I don't know an answer, we love to sit down and look things up. It's like one of our favorite things to do. In fact, Tyler was over, that's my neighbor's charge. He was over and he had been to, where had he been? Maybe it was, he had been somewhere with Diana, and he found out about some animal that, well, I had never heard of, and he was asking me about it, and I'm like, all right, let's look it up. So we sat there on the computer and looked it up together, and he and I think that was his first time, actually, he had an interest in something. Somebody actually took the time to look it up with him, and And I mean, we do this all. Adam and I have spent the whole school year looking up things because he's doing biology. I'll get to that in a little bit. Number 8, home education can be planned around the family schedule. Whoa, talk about freedom. Homeschool does not have to be scheduled during normal school hours. Many home educators have educational activities that happen in the evening hours when both parents can be present and involved. Occasionally our family would travel with Frank. We don't do it as much, but we've done it in the past lots. For us, it became a huge field trip to go on a business trip with Dad. We would know what cities we were going to, so we'd look up those cities, find out if there's anything historical about them. What kind, is there an art museum? Is there a children's museum? Is there a science museum? Is there an aquarium? What's there? And we would pick things to do. We had a zoo membership, we had a science membership, science museum membership, so we could go to all these places once we got somewhere. It was fantastic. My kids actually rated science centers. They rated them on, number 1, did they learn anything? Number 2, was there hands-on things to do, or was it just standing there and reading? Number 3, how many things were broken in the science center? They were amazed at how many times you go up, this looks, it's broken. So they rated them on that. And if you're, just for your interest, if you're in Indianapolis, that was their top science center. It's 5 stories high. You cannot do it all in one day. So there you go. We also found it fun to do beach trips in October. Really cool. Not many people around. We go skiing all the time, and it's great to go skiing in February and early March when, there's no crowd, and there's awesome ski deals for homeschoolers. $21 gets your rental equipment and your lift ticket to ski all day. And there's no crowds. So you ski down, you go up. You ski down, you go up. I mean, you get exhausted, but it's awesome. And my sons, every year, do a summer camp, usually second week of May. While everybody else is still in school, there's a homeschool summer camp that they get to go to. That usually kind of points to the end of our year, wrapping things up. Number 9, home education provides a vehicle for strengthening the family. Back to that one. It says, typical homeschool families experience greater closeness, deeper commitment to one another, and more open communication. Our family has enjoyed learning together through reading, projects, sports, the arts, spiritual development. Children feel secure enough with their parents to be open about such issues as sex, dating, drugs, gossip, and other sensitive, more important issues. I've already told you about the relationship between my 11-year-old versus my 21-year-old, and if they had been in separate schools, she was 10 when he was born, she should have been at school all day, but she was home. She changed diapers. It was pretty cool. She was home. She watched him develop. She watched him grow. She was there the whole time. She'd have been at school, and then, once he would have hit 5 or 6, he'd have been off to school. And having that much time span between them of 10 years, they would barely know each other. But they know each other very well. In fact, they're home alone together, having fun today. They planned for me to come do this so they could have time alone together. Number 10, parents learn with their children. An unexpected byproduct of home education has been that the parent has an opportunity to learn with the children. The homeschool parent often has a greater understanding of history, politics, science, geography, and other subjects as a result of home education process. Now, I figure I'm warding off mental frailty by learning with my children. Either that or I'm totally confusing myself. An example of that is I took Latin in high school. When I was in college, because of my major, I had to take German. And then Sandy's goal has always been, I got to be bilingual, got to know Spanish. So I took Spanish off and on with Sandy for years. We took high school Spanish together for 2 years. Then Lindsay wanted to learn Japanese. I did 4 years of Japanese with Lindsay. Then I did about 1.5 years of Russian with the boys. I can't speak any of these languages. I get totally confused. I would be like trying to concentrate on a language and another language will pop in, and man, it's confusing. But it's fun. It's lots of fun. And I used to ignore history when I was in school. I was a math and science kid. Man, all that mattered to me was math and science. History, that's already happened. What can you learn from that? Yeah, it's the same earth. It's always following the same path. There's nothing new under the sun, right? I learned that. I learned that because of homeschooling and learning history right alongside them. You don't have to know everything to homeschool that subject. You learn right with them. It's really fun. Okay, so I'm doing biology with my 9th grader this year. Biology has changed. Whoa! We have the human genome now. We know, wow, we know all kinds of stuff. You know, back when I was in school, leeches, no, not leeches, but anyhow, 30 years ago, I took my last biochemistry class. And what we know now, I mean, I sat there learning with him going, this is so awesome. He's like, yeah, Mom, look at this. And we would look up extra things and watch lectures on Khan Academy and stuff. I didn't know we knew that. So, it's so much fun. Sorry, I just keep saying that. So what we know about the disease process and human genome is astounding. I'm looking forward to doing biology with the next one in a few years to see what has happened by then. I'm sure we'll be cloning things or something. I don't know. During our biology lesson, of course, I use a secular biology textbook. We actually use a college level textbook. But we look up things we don't know. And of course, lots of things on evolution. Sometimes we read it. We've got to see what that viewpoint is. And what was neat is Adam and I came up with our own little quote. We call it faith in theory. You can have faith in God that He created it all, or you can have faith in a theory that they absolutely teach us fact. I mean, it is fact about evolution. And we sit there going, I just kept saying, remember, this is a theory. Remember, none of this has been proven. Okay? And so it was really neat to sit there and do that together. Then you got worldview transfer from one to the other. Sometimes we skimmed it, sometimes we just skipped it. We just said, we don't want to waste our time on this. Would rather spend our time giving glory to God for what we see, all this amazingness, than spend our time figuring out what they think and what their faith in theory tells them. I love that, faith in theory. Okay. So, a little personal side here. I want to share a little bit about what homeschooling looks like, because it looks so different even in our house every year. And the question I was asked is, how did God call you to homeschool? So I'm going to go way back in time. Frank and I were in this church, and there were homeschooled teenagers in this church. Sandra Littleton had some of them. There was a family in the McDonald's that we became really close to, and they had some. And we had a great time with those teenagers. And Frank and I didn't like teenagers much, so we thought they were pretty cool kids. We'd take them camping with us and do all kinds of neat things. Their parents loved us. And so we were like, wow, this homeschooling thing is pretty cool. Frank had a really negative elementary school experience, and I had one of the most horrid middle school experiences that you can even think of. Druggies beating me up, and terrible. So we didn't have a love for public school. So when our first daughter was born, we knew that with an extremely high-energy child like this, we were going to have to homeschool. We didn't even see an alternative. Every year she would be growing and learning, and she learned like a sponge. She was incredible. Of course, her high energy level made some things challenging, but God always seemed to give us the tools to help her learn. Self-control was a different issue, but learning, we kind of figured out. When her sister joins our school, which usually happens in a younger age with the second one, because they're like, I want to do what she's doing. So she kind of joined our school at a younger age. We did something called unit studies. And the first unit study we ever did was one called 5 in a Row. We had so much fun with 5 in a Row. A unit study is when you take a topic or a book, a subject, and everything is formed around it. Or time, you can even do it around a time period. Everything's formed around it. You know, your history, your science, your reading, you really can't do with math. Be kind of a stretch. Your art, your music, everything is formed around that theme. And I found that my children really liked that. They liked the continuity of the subjects. So, we did lots of hands-on projects as part of our unit studies because that was the easiest way for my oldest to learn. She loved hands-on. She loved researching things and doing hands-on projects. So, even though it wasn't like the favorite thing of the second child, she still learned and she joined in with us and enjoyed herself. So, taking the time to assess a child's learning style is so worth the effort. Because learning happens automatically when you put things and put the information into a form that they just absorb. Every year looked different. And that's how it flowed for many years. We went from unit study to unit study. After we finished 5 in a row and they were older, we did the Prairie Primer, which is on the whole Little House on the Prairie series. It took 2 years to do Little House on the Prairie series. Never read The Long, Long Winter. In the winter, on a long drive. You'll be depressed when you get there. But whenever we felt like we were having a crisis, God seemed to put whatever we needed within our reach, and He would show us things. At one point, I was really down. I didn't feel like not homeschooling. I just didn't feel like we were getting anywhere. And so I wrote down all my reasons for homeschooling, and that became a huge resource for me. Tacked it on the wall, read it every day, prayed about it every day. And I'd look back at those reasons on a bad day, and they would be my big picture. Because sometimes we just focus on a child's inability to learn something. Like, is this kid ever going to learn to spell? The answer is no, they aren't. And it's okay, you know? And so you get, oh man, these fractions. How am I going to get this fraction thing across? You know? And you just start focusing on these things, and you don't really, you take your eyes off the big picture of why you're doing it. So having those reasons written down is very important to review frequently. Sometimes we lose sight of our goals and we dwell too long on a particular weakness in a child. Well, we have 4 children. 2 are graduated and in college. All of them have been homeschooled since birth. They've never gone to an established school. My mindset as a young mom was actually a selfish one. I could not begin to think about putting my child on a bus or even taking her to some huge building to learn from a professional educator who'd been certified by my state. I just didn't know that person. I didn't know what that person's worldview was. I didn't know what that person's morals were. This is the person that my child was going to look up to and bring home ideas from into my home. I didn't know anything about that. That scared me. My daughter loved to be read to. What stories would they hear? And all of their friends at school would be strangers to me. I wouldn't know them. And what about the friendship that the older ones were forming with the younger ones? If they were at school all day, what would happen to that relationship? What would happen to that friendship? Would it have a chance to grow? Not usually. They come home with homework to do. By the time they're done with that, it's bath time, it's bedtime, the cycle starts again, and they don't see each other and interact with each other. No, I could not answer the questions about who was going to be educating my child, but I never liked doing something out of fear. Frank and I just like, we're never going to do something out of fear. Every time we do something out of fear, we do the wrong thing. So I decided I was going to look into what's going on in the homeschooling world, what happens to homeschoolers. I started finding spelling bee winners and geography bee winners and kids going to college at younger ages and kids doing things like missions trips. That young man, concerned with human trafficking. So they had these huge projects and they had time. And I was like, wow, okay, now I have some positive reasons to homeschool. And that's the direction we went. And that held us really well until, and things were, some fairly smoothly, changing it up a lot, but fairly smoothly, until our oldest reached 5th grade. In her 5th grade year, we had a newborn brother, just born in August. Hard to start a school year when you got a newborn in August. A 3-year-old brother, 7-year-old sister who was still not smooth with her reading. She didn't love reading. And so I said, I'm going to have the oldest do an online school. I'm telling you now, online school is not homeschooling. It is absolutely not homeschooling. Online subject, fine. Both my guys have done history online, and they love it. So, online subject, but your whole school day, online, it's not homeschooling. So I thought we'll do that so that I'd have time to help the next one down with the reading, and I'd have time to spend with the boys, and especially with a newborn just born in August. And by the end of October, we knew that online school was not homeschooling. There was no time for unit studies, no time for projects, no time for hands-on exploration whatsoever. It became her and I versus the computer. And our mantra became, let's just get it done. Just get it done. We don't want to be a just get it done. There was no joy in learning. No joy in learning. No joy in the process. So we said, okay, after Christmas, at the end of that 9-week period or whatever, we're stopping this. Well, a disaster struck our family in the death of my father. He was the caregiver for my mom and my grandmother. So all of a sudden we had no caregiver. The only good thing that came out of online experience, which we did the whole school year, it was horrible, was my oldest daughter kind of got to the point where her frustration with her inability to pay attention to things peaked. And, okay, this is a child, and I'm not kidding, from around age 5, said, I'm going to be a missionary. God wants me to be a missionary. I can't wait to be a missionary. And that's been her focus forever. And here, this was the quote that just got us. And it was, how is God ever going to use me if I can't even control my own brain? Because she knew. She would try to concentrate. She would daydream. And it was frustrating her. I had to sit beside her and keep her on task, but it was now frustrating her to the point where she felt incapable of controlling it. So, she was tested. She was definitely found to have ADHD. Now, she was in 5th grade. I'm sure that back in kindergarten, if she had been in school, she would have been tested. But I didn't care. We figured out how to educate her through it all. But now she was feeling frustration. So we went through all kinds of different levels of meds and different meds, and it took us a long time to find something that sort of worked. I cannot say that she found the miracle drug and everything clicked and banged. She was an excellent student and never had a problem again. But at least she got to the point where she could feel the difference. Her meds helped her concentrate. Her meds helped her get things done, like math that she hated doing, things like that. So the next year I felt the Lord saying to change things up. So we went to something called a block schedule. These are just random, just for you guys to have something to look at. This was one of my Odyssey teams. So that next year we went to a block schedule. By this, I mean that the first 6 weeks of school, we only did art, science, and history. And we focused on one time period for those subjects. One thing I learned was they liked the interconnectivity. I talked about that a little earlier. And the online school, every subject was different, and there was no connectivity between anything. So our block course ran 6 weeks. We would start, my kids were early risers. We had breakfast and everything done by 8. So we would work from 8 till noon. And we would do just those 3 subjects. And usually after lunch, if there was anything left to do, they were read aloud type things, and we would read out loud to each other. And then, after Christmas, we'd do the same thing. So it wasn't like we'd take our Christmas break, and then it wasn't like, okay, it's back to, this time frame and, book work. And now we would do the block course again. It gave them excitement to get back to school again after Christmas so that we could do another block of science, art, and history. So for 12 weeks, we did a year's worth of science, art, and history. And that left us with 24 weeks to do what my kids call their book work, their grammar, their spelling, their vocabulary, their music. All right, here's my subject. In that picture, I've gone through it. There's only one girl who isn't homeschooled in that whole picture. It was the girl in the green next to Lindsay. All of those girls were homeschooled. It's so cool. How has God equipped and qualified me to do the work of homeschool mission field? Well, first of all, you got to know this is totally God. As a teen, I did not like children. I had teen friends who just oogle over babies and want to hang out with all these little toddlers. And I'm like, oh my goodness, get me out of here. I would mow lawns. I would trim trees. My dad and I used to trim trees for people. I would run errands. I would do anything but babysit. Except if I had a whole group of middle school boys to keep an eye on, and we could build tree houses and go-karts and things, yeah. I would do it then. So I was also a perfectionist, which is a curse. Kids are messy, kids are noisy, and pretty much all around annoying to a perfectionist. I remember we'd be in a restaurant and a baby or a young kid would just start carrying on. I would lock eyes with my mom and go, "You will not have grandchildren with me. No way." I mean, I was serious. Absolutely serious. Had nothing, didn't want anything to do with children. Then, 10 to 12 years later, Frank and I are expecting our first child. Approximately 9 to 10 months before she was born, we were actually here. I went to a baby shower. This is all Darla Kazner's fault. She made me hold that little baby granddaughter of hers. And I'm like, oh, this thing's alive. Look at those fingers. Look at those fingernails. Look how little. I was totally sucked in. I sat there, and her name's Cassie, and Cassie was just like staring at me when she wasn't sleeping, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And then Darla made me change her diaper. Never changed a diaper before. Because she was getting all, I'm like, here, she must be hungry or something. Darla was like, oh, come with me. We followed back to some bedroom in Sandra Littleton's house, and she got out and she goes, oh, she probably just needs changed. I'm sure she's not hungry, she just ate. She laid her down, she goes, lay her down. How do I do that? I don't want to lay her down. I laid down on the bed and slid the baby off my arms. I was like, okay, that was cool. And then she's like, okay, you can change your diaper. What? So, from my first diaper changing experience, the next day we left to drive home, Frank and I. And I'm like, Frank, I think I want to be a mom. And he went, I've been waiting. He was just waiting for me to say when I wanted to start our family. It was so cool. So then, after Sandy was born, I met some homeschooling moms at a Lalacia League nursing mom meeting. And they were really neat ladies, and some of them, had older children that they were homeschooling, and they were telling me all about it after the meeting, and they're like, hey, come join our group as soon as you want. You can bring her when she's 2. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. So, around age 4, she's teaching herself to read. She loved to be read to. And she'd sit there and she'd follow along. And she'd memorize the books. And then she'd go, is this the word yes? Is this the word green? Boy, yeah, it is. She was memorizing the books. So, I went to visit a friend. Actually, I went to visit Marion, who was homeschooling at the time in Virginia Beach. And she was like, you need to get this kid sing, spell, read, and write. She loves to sing, she loves music, and it puts all this phonics stuff to music. Ooh, that sounds fun. She took me to a bookstore and that had homeschooling supplies, and I bought Sing, Spell, Read, and Write. Voila, we were homeschooling. And yeah, so before Sandy's 5th birthday, she had finished all, they call raceway steps, she had finished all the raceway steps and was reading simple chapter books. I had been worried early on, how do you teach someone to read? I mean, wow, that must be hard. So, worry gone, God supplied us with the tool we needed to teach reading. There's tons of curriculums out there to teach reading, but I have used the same cassette tapes, believe it or not, and the same curriculum to teach all 4 children to read, because it's what worked for us. It's another part of our thing, use what works for you. The crazy homeschooling. Unique and creative homeschoolers. I said no peer pressure there. The key to homeschooling is use what works for you. Use what works for your child's learning style. Use what works for your family. I have been told that when my girls were young and we were doing 5 in a row, that's just too simple. You're not challenging your students much. And I was like, ooh, should it be hard? Well, I realized it didn't have to be hard. We were doing something they enjoyed. They loved the learning that went along with it. I realized that the material presented was being learned. So why would I discard something just because it isn't hard? So if you're teaching in a way that fits your child's learning style, it isn't hard. Now, not every subject will be that way. Some of them they will love, and some of them they will not love. And those things might be a little harder, but you try to meet their style. I knew that my daughter was learning when we had a missionary visit our church from Indonesia. Came back to the children's ministry. As soon as she heard they were from Indonesia, she ran to the map, pointed to it, and yelled, "Have you seen cinnamon growing there?" Because we had just read a book called How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World. And in the book, they traveled all over the world to gather elements to make this apple pie. And they had been to Indonesia to get cinnamon. And the lady was like, "Why, yes, I have seen cinnamon growing there." And she was totally impressed at this little kid. So by doing what worked for our family and not worrying about how rigorous or hard it was, my students were learning the subject joyfully. You see, God equipped us with the right materials for us. I was not an expert on geography, history, or literature, but God knows all, and He is the wisest teacher, and He will never ask you to do something He doesn't equip you to do. So, this is actually a quote by the creator of 5 in a Row curriculum, and I loved it. He said, "We're not trying to do school at home. We're not professional educators. We don't have massive numbers of kids. We're trying to do homeschool. These are 2 entirely different propositions. We're not trying to replicate the time, style, and content of the classroom. Rather, we're trying to cultivate a lifestyle of learning in which learning takes place from morning until bedtime, 7 days a week. The formal portion of each teaching day is just the tip of the iceberg." Quote by Steve Lambert. So I was asked, how do I respond when people tell me they could never homeschool? I would never tell someone to homeschool. I would secretly love if more people homeschooled and actually the public schools were emptying. I would love that. But I would never say, "You should homeschool that kid." Usually I tell people how God has equipped me to homeschool and our family to homeschool and the blessings our family has received because we homeschool. Many times people who have told me that they couldn't homeschool, I have a family, wow, I'm glad you guys do that. We could never do that. We're not the type of family who could do that. They ended up homeschooling. they find themselves homeschooling and calling me and going, "Help, can you give me some curriculum, ideas? I don't know what to do." So I'd never say you must homeschool. So back to my freedom theme. We have freedom in our schedule. We have freedom to pick curriculum. We have freedom to do activities. We have freedom to choose our classes. And there were lots of extra things that we've done and did this year. We went to the North Carolina Symphony. We went to the museum to see the Porsche exhibit. That was, my guys liked that. I think I liked it even more. I love cars. In college, I had cars on my walls. Not guys, cars. Cars in log cabins. Never built a log cabin, never owned a sports car, but man, I thought they were really cool looking. I put them on my walls. We helped friends move as part of our school day. We took trips to the mountains. We went skiing on the weekdays. It was wonderful. And we were part of an Odyssey of the Mind team that I coached that went to World Finals. So I'm going to wrap up just by giving you, I have all kinds of things to tell you about. I was telling you about my student survey, what's the best thing about homeschooling. My daughter Lindsay said, actually having a relationship with your parents, not just seeing them at night and at meals. That was cool. She says, you're home and you contribute to the whole family and you know what's going on there. Here's a young man, he's a senior in high school, just graduating. He says, the thing I like best about homeschooling is what you could study and you could do things that you wanted. If there was a lesson that I didn't deem worthwhile, I'd ask my mom and she would tell me whether I had to do it or not. I could skip it, I could move on. And on that note, when I got my work back, I could look at it and have the opportunity to fix what I didn't get right and actually learn the material, not just move on, not having a good understanding of it. He said another big advantage is the flexibility of all. If something comes up during the day that you want to do, go do it. On the other hand, if something comes up that you don't want to do, you got a great excuse. I have too much schoolwork to do. So that was a senior in high school this year. Here's the young man who's a whiz at math. He says, I get to socialize with my family. I thought that was cute. His sister said, I love homeschooling because I get to spend so much more time with my family. Here was a young man who just said, I like getting to be at home. His little sister was funny. She says, I don't have to worry about being shot. Now that, from her, is very funny. They live out in the country. They have a farm. They hunt. They have guns for recreational use. And here she is going, I'm homeschooled, so I don't have to worry about getting shot. Her mom thought that was just very ironic. One of them, their oldest brother, who's graduating, he said, I love this, God is welcome here in my school. His word is taught in our school books. For more reasons we need. So this is just North Carolina homeschool law. Compulsory age is 7 to 16. Required days of instruction is 9 calendar months, 180 days. We just keep a calendar, X the days we've done school. There's no required subjects, but you are required to do a standardized testing every year where they are tested on their English, grammar, reading, spelling, and math. Now, if you don't have a good tester and they don't do well, it doesn't matter. It's not like they say, oh, your child didn't do well, you can no longer homeschool. It's just to keep for your records. The definition of homeschool changed just last year, May of 2013. It says a non-public school consisting of the children of not more than 2 families or households, that's always been that way, where the parents or legal guardians or members of either household determine the scope and sequence of academic instruction, provide academic instruction, and determine additional sources of academic instruction. The part that changed is that the parent can determine additional sources. It used to say that the parent had to provide academic instruction, period. But I tutor lots of high schoolers in math and science usually, but this year just math. And so I am their academic instruction for that. And Now that's totally legal. Parents, you have to have a high school diploma or GED. The records you keep a calendar, Xing the days you've done school, you keep their immunization records, you notify the state director of the Division of Non-Public Education of your intent to operate a homeschool and include the school's name, address, owner, chief administrator. You do a standardized test that you keep on file for a year. And homeschoolers are free to choose which standardized test they want. And there's a chart of them that I gave you. These are Stanford, Iowa, California, Woodcock, Johnson, and the PASS. I love the PASS. If I'm going to be given an unfunded mandate by the state, I want the cheapest one. The PASS is very cheap. Plus, it's nationally standardized, so it fits the requirement. It has the results, the percentage where your child placed nationally, but also amongst homeschoolers. That's the only test that does that. And then it tells you feedback like, oh, if your child did extremely well in this subject, a way to challenge them might be. So it gives you suggestions. There's a whole column of suggestions. I've told several people about PASS who are using it now. It's for 3rd through 8th grade. As soon as your child's 7, you have to do this. So I started with this. You can say what quarter of the year you're homeschooling, so I just picked the first quarter of 3rd grade, even though they weren't really in 3rd grade yet, because the results don't matter, it's just for your files. And now, actually, he's still there. My 9th grader is taking the ACT right now. Not that I expect my 9th grader to score extremely well on the ACT. He hasn't had the math to do that yet. He hasn't had all the English and literature to do that yet. But he's getting practice at taking a huge standardized test. So that's why I have my 9th graders start taking it. Some homeschool students start taking it even younger, and they just get practice taking it. So SAT does not fit the state's requirements, but the ACT does. All right. So I have lots more information, but that's as far as my formal talk. That's it, but I am totally open to taking questions.
I've got one. How did you choose to give the standardized test at the beginning of the quarter? Is that so that you could get a measurement of where they are and where they need work through the rest of the year?
Yeah. It's like, and we've taken it different times during the school year. But actually this year we took it in March, since Sandy was going to be home and I wanted some freedom in our schedules.